I'll jump in. It's 2:31. We'll kick off the February Lynchburg Parking Authority Board meeting here at 2:30. And we'll start with welcoming our new administrative parking coordinator. So as you all know, recently we've been going through the hiring process, and we were finally able to hire a well-qualified and much-loved candidate, Penny Campbell. Penny comes from the city assessor's office, where she spent 9 years?
12 years.
12 years in the city assessor's office. But she is excited to be part of our parking team, and her and Phyllis have been diving right in to take over the duties, and we're trying not to overwhelm her. So we really want her to stay. But I wanted to bring Penny here and introduce you to her. She may come in and out of the meetings or be emailing you if there's other stuff that pops up. And do you want to say anything? You want to?
No, I've been with the city for going on 19 years, so I know a little bit of how other departments and outside world works with the government and everything like that. So hopefully everything goes a little smoothly.
It will.
Well, it's good to have you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining our team.
Thank you.
And if you want to stay, you can, or
Okay.
if you got stuff you want to do.
Yeah, if y'all don't mind, I'm gonna go ahead.
Thank you. And we have another new member, so we want to welcome Mr. Charles Warner onto our board. Thank you so much for joining us and showing interest in the Parking Authority, and we're excited to have you on board as we continue to evolve in the parking world for downtown. And we want to take a few minutes to tell us about yourself and what interests you in being on the board, and what some of maybe one or two things you hope to accomplish.
Sure. I have a software company downtown on Jefferson Street, and through that we have some local employees, and we also bring employees out of town now and then. And I hope from that I can help the board with things related to things like communication, technology, that kind of areas I think I could be helpful in, hopefully. Those are my areas of interest.
Yeah, definitely. That's if you recall, that's part of our 2019 to 2021 comprehensive work plan, where we talked about communication outreach. It's one of the major goals that's identified in there. So when Charles and I met, we're really happy to have him on board, and like, let's tackle this, let's go, because this is something I've been wanting to do for a while. So having the expertise here will really help us to get into that next level of communication for our community. So thank you again. All right, and next item up for the agenda is going into the meeting minutes from December 8th of 2020. Was there any comments, recommendations, or changes from the meeting minutes?
I move to approve.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
And motion passes. And our next item is old business, which is our recommendation to approve Division 3 of Chapter 25 of the Code of the City of Lynchburg related to permitted parking in the City of Lynchburg. This is one of those items that we've been discussing for a couple of meetings now, and we've gone through a few iterations of it. Today we have our Deputy City Attorney, Matt, with us. That will help answer any questions, because I know we've kind of had, the board has historically had clarification issues and wanted to know about certain wording that was in there. So the iteration that you have before you is number 4 or 5? Not too many. Not too many, yeah. So, but it's a relative cleanup of where we were trying to separate. So this one, it's a little confusing. So I included in the packet Division 3 permit parking as it stands in city code currently, because there's a section, the first part of that will stay in code. So the only amendments to this Division 3 permit parking is what's presented in the packet, which relates to the application to permit, visitor passes, and then we go into all the changes to creating different districts. One district being the Church and Court Street permitted parking district in the blocks of 500 Church Street, 700 Court, and 1000 Court. And then we had the other section related to the Central Business District parking. So that's all residents and businesses within the bounds of the Central Business District, which, as a reminder, is Clay Street to the river and 5th Street to Route 29. Within these sections, we added language about renewals. That was a point of discussion at the last meeting, that renewals are due by the 1st of every month. If they're not paid by the 1st of every month, then those permit holders are subject to fines and penalties as signed in each facility, and they have up to the 5th of the month to pay before any late fees assessed. After the 5th of the month, if they renew their permit, then there's a $5 administrative fee that's charged at that point. That was a change from our last discussion where we were talking about the 15th, and we pulled that back to the 5th to be more consistent with general operations throughout the city where, for instance, if your rent's due on the 1st, you usually have a 5-day leniency period before any late fees are assessed. So this makes more sense. It also eliminates some of the confusion that we had. Well, what do we do between the 1st and the 15th? And that's where that code language was inserted about if you don't pay by the 1st, then you are subject to fines and penalties as outlined in the division. The other major point that we discussed with these ordinances was fees, how much these were going to be. In the section 25-309 Church and Court Street, we put in the paragraph at the end, the 4th paragraph, that the Lynchburg Parking Authority shall by written resolution set the monthly parking rates for off-street city-owned and managed facilities. But because this ordinance still deals with on-street parking, it's still in the purview of the city council to decide that rate. Lynchburg Parking Authority doesn't have control to set rate for on-street parking regulations. So, and jump in anytime, Matt, if I'm saying something incorrect. Yeah, okay, so because the parking authority doesn't have that ability to set on-street restrictions and regulations and fees, we still kept that monthly permit rate in there, but we changed it from the $15 a year to the $25 a month, as described by the authority at the last meeting, that was just, it needed to be brought back up to a market value rate. And members thought that the $25 per month was fair and equitable, considering that the rest of the residents in the central business district have to pay $25 per month. We removed the restrictions on the number of permits that can be issued per residence. If you recall, the current ordinance states that only 2 permits can be issued per residential address. That was fine back in the day when those townhomes were constructed because they were single-family dwellings. What's happened now over the years is these dwellings have become multi-unit dwellings where there's 2 or 3 units in there, and that could have multiple tenants. So if, for example, one unit, addressed unit, say 510, could have 3 apartments with 6 people. Well, right now we only give 2 permits and the other 4 people don't have a chance. They have to go find parking elsewhere because those permits have already been designated. So we cleaned it up by saying that there is no restrictions to the number of permits that can be issued per residential address within the permitted district. So that 500 block of Church Street as an example, and that any residents that choose not to participate or those spaces are full, then they can get a off-street residential permit through the CBD. Absolutely.
I don't see the word residence in any of this, so, you also have permits for businesses. How is that handled? How do you just assume it applies to residents? You don't use the word that I can find.
Madam Mayor, are you referring to the special permitted parking districts?
Yes, yeah.
It doesn't have particular residences, but it does say residents.
Oh, okay.
And that second paragraph.
Where is it? I can remember this. Oh, yeah, duh, I found it.
And it should be in 309.2 also.
Okay, sorry. Thank you for that.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah, so this section just typically applies to residents. These changes, that doesn't apply to the business.
Correct.
I just didn't see that.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's where I included the permit parking policy as part of this discussion too, the draft for this, because this takes into account the different permits that we are selling through the Department of Parking Management and addresses that non-residential permit in the rate that the parking authority would set so that it's not an ordinance. And then we would absolutely, in the case, Toby, I know you had mentioned before about notification, we would fall back on what's an ordinance here in the 3rd paragraph that states, or I'm sorry, not the 3rd, but the 4th, about how we would notify of any rate changes.
Yeah.
Those are the minimum standards that we would follow, and we would absolutely go above that and make sure that any permit holders get notice of those changes.
Yeah. And I just want to clarify, when you're a resident of the CBD or the CCD and you buy your permit, you get to park, well, the CCD can park on the street in the designated areas, but they can also park in any of the off-street facilities.
No, they're only permitted for this area right here.
So when you give a permit to a CBD, is that for a designated parking lot?
Yes.
Okay. I think that's not quite totally clear.
If I could jump in on that as well.
Okay.
So the way I understood the ordinance is the CCD permitted on-street parking for residents as well as facility parking for residents. Whereas the CBD only permitted off-street facilities for residents. So that was what, I guess our office was of the understanding the board was
Yeah,
trying to
I
seek.
guess my question is, like, and you're in the CCD here, it says, residents subject to, that they can apply for permits to park their vehicles on city streets, public ways, or off city streets or city-managed parking facilities without regard. I guess, and maybe I didn't read the parking permit policy word for word. Maybe I skimmed it, but maybe I didn't see that when you apply for a permit, it's for a designated, it's either on-street or a designated parking lot deck that you can't move around. Like, say there's no parking on the street, so I wanted to park in the Clay Street parking lot. I can't do that because I don't have a permit for the Clay Street parking lot. Is that correct?
You are correct.
So did I see where it says that in here?
In the second paragraph of the Church and Court Street, it does say at the end, permits to park their vehicles in the city's streets, public ways, or off-street city-owned or city-managed parking facilities.
Yeah, I read that.
Yeah, whereas
So I think I understand the question. I think when it uses the word apply, it's leaving it to the discretion of the Department of Parking Management to determine the availability of where that resident can park. So say there's been a number, and I'm still somewhat new here, but say there's been a huge amount of street passes that have been given out, if that's how they're designated. Well, if there's no more, they would have to only give parking facility passes. So it would really be left to the discretion of the Division of Parking Management. I don't know if it's something you would want to be that detailed in the ordinance.
No, my question was way more general than that. It was, is there somewhere in this parking policy that says that permits, when applied for, apply to a specific lot? Because I didn't see it. So it would be nice if, for me, as a downtown, not that I live downtown, but I have a lot of property downtown, it would be nice if I bought a permit, and then if I couldn't park on the street, I could move to a parking deck. And I look at that in saying that the people that buy the permits may wonder why and where it says that they can only do one thing or another. So I'm not sure whether there, in the parking policy, maybe there should be clarification. Did I miss it, David? Is it in there?
no, you're spot on. I found it. It's on page 4 of the policy, permit issuance disclaimer. All permit sales are based on the availability of parking in the designated facility requested by the parking permit applicant and on a first-come, first-served basis. So
Okay.
I just put a note as you were talking that we need to add language that basically the parking management department will do their best to facilitate the request, but in the case that is not available, they'll be assigned to another.
Where is that language?
Page 4.
On this one, this cute one here. Yeah, on page 4, under parking issuance disclaimer, it says on a first come, first served basis, but I'm looking to see where it says, yeah, it's on a first come, first served basis, but I don't, where does it say in the specific parking lot?
Well, that's just, we can't, it'll be assigned at the time that they purchase the permit. So say, for instance, an applicant comes and says they want to purchase for the Mosaic lot. And we.
I understand the concept, David. I'm just wondering where it says in here that when you get a permit, you know, pretty simple for people to read. When you get a permit, it's for this lot. It's not for all lots. Yeah.
The verbiage should be clear.
Yeah, that's just my point, is that it might decrease a lot of people
Okay.
coming back later to just put something in there that says when you buy a permit, it's for a specific location,
I
not
would
for
agree.
all locations.
I just purchased a bunch of permits myself, and it wasn't abundantly for me.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if you have a bunch of tenants, then you'll understand how many questions you gotta answer.
Okay, that can be added. I'll put that addition in
Yeah.
the permit issuance disclaimer about going
Yeah.
to a specific facility. Okay,
Yeah, I just think it's good to
okay.
make it clear.
Agreed, absolutely.
It'd be much more valuable, $25 a month, if you could park anywhere, though, just out of.
And one of the items that Ms. Yeager and I had discussed as well is that within this permit parking policy, I will be providing another draft that expands on visitor use permits. That was another question she had brought up in our discussion, is better explanation of visitor permits in the policy, subject to what we're talking about now, parking management office discretion and issuance. So I'll expand on that and include similar language to like what we have in the ordinance, and that was something Matt and I had talked about, is visitor passes being subject to written rules and policies as outlined by the Lynchburg Parking Authority. So we'll get that, I'll get that squared away as well and a little more clear too.
Okay, I have another comment.
Go? Yeah,
You made me read it.
I know.
You called me and specifically made me read it in advance, so. On the parking enforcement part,
Yes.
or you're not gonna do any on Saturday? Remember
we
when we
only-
had all those issues with people parking at the market and on the 12th Street? I mean, I'm, just asking.
The Saturday enforcement that we do is at the request of the community market manager to help out. And
Okay.
it's infrequent. So during
Okay.
market season, it's every other Saturday. It's really dependent on how busy the market is. And then Ricky and I work together on when that is appropriate. I mean, if he doesn't think it's appropriate, he calls us. So it's not during normal enforcement hours. And if we don't have enforcement personnel to do it, then I just tell Ricky, I don't have staff right now that can handle that. But we do, and we make it work for this time being, but it is not part of their regular schedule of Monday through Friday, 8 to 5.
Okay. All right.
So that's why I didn't include that Saturday in there, because
Okay.
it's a
I was
special
just curious,
circumstance.
because seemed to me before COVID, we'd been doing a lot of Saturdays.
Just at the market to help out. And that was the only time we've done it.
Okay. Well, as much as I hate to see my street parking go to $25 a month, it's an excellent job, David.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sure I'll get calls from the residents. Any other questions on the ordinance? Do we all feel that we do have a quorum? And even with the 3 absentee votes, if the motion passes 4-0, this is an item that we would then take to city council. And then city council will get a chance to review it. It will do 2 public readings before final approval. And then once that happens, it would be enacted and we would roll with the fees as set. In the way that the ordinance for Dave and Charles, the way that the ordinance is written, this is why this permit parking policy is part of it is because the rates are in here. So we wrote, Matt did a very good job of putting in there that the Lynchburg Parking Authority can set the rates. So what we can do as the parking authority is bring this back on a yearly basis, review the permit policy, review rates, and make a determination to vote for a rate increase if needed. And then that would not have to go through council at that point. That's what we changed when we redid this ordinance. It would be a board decision for off-street parking rates. If we wanted to change the on-street rate to match, we would have to go back to council with another recommendation to amend that ordinance to mimic the increase that we did at the board level. So with that, is any other questions on that? Did we hit all, I mean, those are, as stated earlier, some of the major points of this whole process was talking about late fees. It was putting the ability to set the monthly rate for off-street facilities in the CBD to the parking authority. We talked about visitor passes. We separated the districts to make that more clear. We cleared up a lot of the other language that was in there to make it more concise. Unless I'm missing anything, Toby, I think I'm.
Just one question.
Yeah.
Do you see any issues with the possibility of, with the rates going up, with residents maybe moving their cars further over to Clay Street and Madison? I know there's like a parking lot there at Madison and 6th, and do you see any issues with overcrowding in those areas, or do you think it'll work out with the higher fees?
I don't see that per se. There hasn't been enough increase in the residential units up on Clay Street to really see that push yet. Increasing the rates will cause, some of the residents of concern. There are, and I don't have the numbers sold. One of the key reasons why we were looking at increasing rates when we did the permit parking committee was to bring it, like Brandon had said at his last meeting, bring everything up to market value. We're just way, way below the market value when we look at the comparable rates for other private facilities. We've got other, our one private lot owner, he's expressed concern with the rates being so low and him being able to make payments on his facilities. So if we're going to be competitive and be able to afford to do improvement projects, we got to get the rates up to market value. And I mean, they're going to go where they're going to go to try to find free. That's just the nature of the beast in parking, is everybody wants it free, so they'll continue to try to find that. Other residents will just pay the fee and probably just move on. Yeah. So do we have, if there's no more discussion, do we have a motion to approve the ordinance revisions as presented? And then we can move those to City Council for review and public reading in the next steps of the process? Anybody want to make a recommendation? Can be a recommendation to approve or a recommendation to not approve.
Well, normally I would decline to vote on it because of my street parking. I have a vested interest in that.
So is that
So we don't have a
a
quorum.
valid abstention?
I mean, if there's no, I guess your concern is because you're a resident of one of the districts?
No, I'm
That-
not actually a resident, I'm an owner. In both of the CCC districts designations.
An owner of a facility?
Rental property, residential property.
And those individuals would be the ones?
It's not really a legal conflict of interest, it's a personal
I see.
conflict of interest.
Okay. I was just trying to decipher.
I-
Well, unless you all have bylaws prohibiting abstentions or rules on abstentions, I mean, general Robert's Rules of Order would permit you to abstain. I guess just keep in mind for this, to get a recommendation or a not recommendation, you have to have a majority of your board a majority of the members of the board. So if you have a 7-member board, obviously you would need 4 yeses.
And then if she abstains, we got
You
3
have 3
absentees
yeses and
and
1
an
abstention.
abstention, so it's a fail, 3-0, even if it were to go full.
So I mean, I suppose at that point, you would either have to come back for review again and another vote, or I don't know if there's an explicit requirement for the parking authority to take an action as far as recommending or not. I'm certain city council would be very interested to know what the parking authority thought as a group on this proposed ordinance.
I think it needs to come to council recommended.
So, I mean, if it's something where, well, first and foremost, I mean, there's no motion on the table. So if there's no motion on the table and no one's willing to make the motion, I suppose it could either come back if there's someone that would be willing to make the motion. I don't know. I haven't been privy to those discussions.
I'm not sure I should make the motion since I'm not here. Oh, dear
Well,
me.
even if I voted, I would not make the motion for second. Let me put it that way.
Okay, I guess I can make the motion then. I make a motion that we accept these revisions as presented. Now we need a second.
And then we need all in favor?
Probably do a roll call
Roll
vote
call?
if we know there's potentially an an abstention.
Okay, roll call vote. Mr.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, so you can get going with it.
Thank you. Okay, it passes 4-3 with 3 absentees.
Does this align with the revisions, the policy? I mean, are we
Yes.
all aligned in terms of how many permits and all that kind of stuff?
How, in terms of,
It is,
yes,
yeah.
yes.
Except for a couple things. Also on page 3, you might want to just put in the parking rate for the CCD. You just have surface and park and deck parking. And you might put in the street parking rate.
Oh, define the CCD on-street rate.
I was
Okay.
just wondering if the visitor permits aligned with what,
Yeah, he's going to clarify that. I asked about that this morning.
Yep.
okay.
Was that this part over here where they take it out, it says that we have to issue some sort of rule or something or other, so, you know, we have to prescribe something.
Okay.
So he's just prescribing it in here, when he took all the visitors pass out of the other.
Okay.
Yep. So I'll make those corrections that we talked about today in the draft, and then I'll send it all back out to the board for review again. Because we would want this as part of what the package that we're presenting to council, so that they can see it in its totality of where the authority lies. We can, but it's not complete. Matt's bringing up an interesting point that whether or not we should vote to accept the policy modifications in relation to the ordinance. Yes, we would vote on this permit policy as being something that the authority, a controlling measure for what we would go at in the parking management office if anybody asks us questions. We say, well, this has been approved by the parking authority, like the last page has my signature and the chair's signature on that. And that's something we can vote on or right now or wait.
I'll make a motion to approve the policy as amended.
Okay, and roll call. Mr. Cook?
Aye.
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 Carries 4-0. Thank you. That was easy.
It's going to happen, so, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a,
Any other? I think that's it. Oh, you want to stick around for that one? Yeah. Well, we got that one. Okay, well, thank you. We finally got that under our belts, I will make the changes to the policy as we talked about and put that in a packet, and next it'll go to city council. So I'll get that up and notify you all when that is going to be on city council's probably work session, I would imagine. 23rd, if it's, okay. Possibly, well, no, I can't get, we'll see. Yeah, we'll get it out there. Okay, and now that moves us into our agenda items. First item is the recommendation to approve the Department of Parking Management permit policy, which we just did. The second is the recommendation to elect a chairman, vice chairman, secretary, and treasurer as defined in our articles. Now, unfortunately, we're missing 3 members. So at this point, I'd like to defer the recommendation until we've got a full board at our next meeting in April. But I would ask that if there's any recommendation from the board as to who would be suitable for any number of those positions, to please let me know. Anybody? And then,
Really good chairman. He probably understands parliamentary procedure.
who?
Dr. Mundy.
Dr. Mundy? Okay. And then I'll reach out to Dr. Mundy and talk to him about it. And if there's anybody else that you wanted to email me on, let me know. And then I'll reach out to the individual and we'll go from there. But I do feel this is an appropriate measure to have with everybody here, even though, so. Okay, we'll move into the report from the parking manager. And this is we'll start with the parking management fiscal year report. Not much to really expand on this report. It's our standard monthly board report. Our revenues at the pay stations are still down, but we just started to collect revenue in the Clay Street deck and the Crossroads lot beginning February 1st as approved at the last meeting. So I expect some of those fees to come up. We've had some folks drop off and not renew their permits. So we've had some movement of different businesses that older businesses have relocated out of downtown. So we've had probably around 16 permits, monthly permits that aren't renewing right now. That was anticipated. I had stated earlier that as the new year rolls around, I thought that we would have some that would drop off as their different budgets start on yearlies versus mid-year like the city does. So we're still working at trying to get people into the program and getting them a place to park. Having the free revert back to the 2-hour status has created more of a demand recently. So in the recent weeks, we have had folks from like the Crossroads lot, Mosaic lot contact us and say, hey, I'd like to get a permit again so I can park there. So we've been really happy that folks have stepped up and said, hey, I really like parking here. Let's go ahead and get a permit for at my monthly rate. Any questions on any of the revenues or expenditures?
How many ambassadors do we have now?
We have 2.
You full-time, Dave? Full-time?
Mm-hmm. Okay, then jumping into, I put in the proposed FY 2022 budget for review. There's been some changes. We had some decreases in our internal service charges for fleet vehicles, so there are adjustments made there. We made some adjustments with the hiring of our full-time administrative parking coordinator, Penny, so there are some changes to salaries and employee benefits. We were fortunate that our internal service charges went down from what was originally proposed, so we saved money in the little extra increase in Penny's position, so that it basically offset each other. And then we made modifications at $776 to hourly parking fees to balance the budget. To Toby's point, we currently have 2 full-time enforcement officers. The new proposed budget calls for the elimination of that vacant position. So we used to have 3. One took another job within the city. We never filled that vacancy. But with the new parking technology that we're going to be deploying soon, that takes all the efficiencies that we'll realize from the new technology will basically take the place of another officer on foot. So we'll be able to do the same and more of the job with only 2 officers. So we'll maintain that full-time 2 staff, and then we drop the vacancy and use that money that we had previously budgeted for in past years to support the increase in the software expenses from the new technology. That's why if you look, you'll see under contractual services, there's an increase of $12,500 into next year's proposed budget. And if there's any questions on the proposed budget, I'm happy to answer them. That all will be going to council shortly here, so if there's any last minute modifications, I think we still have some time. Miss Megan Palmer will probably want to shoot me, but we could get it in. Okay. All right. And then the other pages are our revenue breakdowns, our 5-year fiscal revenue streams to show you where we are comparable to previous years. You know, as many other revenue streams of the city, we're struggling to stay afloat. And, you know, if you look, you'll see there's dips. So hopefully that'll all stabilize in the next several months as the vaccine gets out there and life gets back to a little post-pandemic and folks start getting active more. We'll see more visits to downtown and hopefully more business growth as well. Holiday, you know, the last page, Holiday Inn, the old Holiday Inn, which is now the Lynchburg Grand Hotel, is still doing free parking. They've got their gates up, so I don't see them coming back anytime soon. I can certainly reach out to Tony and see if he's going to change that, but the Pac Life ended their lease with the Lynchburg Grand Hotel ending December 31st. So the 150 cars that they had are no longer there, and we don't know when Pac Life's going to come back. And then without the events going on at the Academy, Tony really is struggling to have any type of transient parkers there. So at this time, it makes the most sense just to keep it open and free. I'll stay on it though, and as things change, meet with Tony and see what that looks like to bring those gates back down into operation. Any questions on the budget or revenues or? Okay. Update on parking changes effective February 1st. As you know, we converted several lots back. We converted them to an hourly status versus free all day. And Gwen and Yolanda, our parking enforcement officers, have been reporting that that's been working out very well. I've gotten out and checked them out a few times too. We've now seen space availability in lots such as the riverfront, which was a big concern. As I stated earlier, people are buying parking permits to park in those lots. We're still doing the warning notices, so we're going around and tickets that are being issued for violations of over the 2-hour limit, get that little warning slip in there. So that's been going well. They've reported really no issues, just more use, more space availability. So what we intended it to do is working. And any questions on that? On the free parking and where we are? No? Okay. All right. New business. If you recall, wow, this would have been back in the summer, we put on the legislative agenda to change the term limits for Lynchburg Parking Authority board members from a 5-year term limit to a 3-year term limit, and that has passed. So it was House Bill 1768, and everything got passed just recently on 2/8. It was all yeas, no nays. So our charter will be revised to reflect those staggering terms. Yeah. So those changes will be enacted.
So that doesn't have to go before council, we already have it.
Yeah, council already approved the legislative agenda that went before. Each member of the authority shall be appointed to a term of 3 years, and any person appointed to fill a vacancy shall be appointed to serve only for the unexpired term, and any member of the authority may be reappointed. So you can serve 2 terms, 3 years each, total of 6 years.
That's consistent
Yes.
with other boards and commissions, that's great.
Yep, which is what we wanted. And then the second item on the agenda got brought up by Mr. Marple when him and I were talking. and it deals with the scooters. So Matt's here to help with some of that as well. Yeah. Yeah, we kind of dove into that. He was,
See 'em all over town.
yeah, you see the scooters all over town. They were recently, I've noticed and got an email on it that they have a bunch of them parked against one of the back walls on the bottom floor of the Midtown parking deck. So while Dave's email says that there's a definite plus to the city and he likes seeing them around, however, like all businesses operating in the city, they should be restricted or managed for parking in the city-operated vehicle parking lots. At this point, those lot spaces are reserved for monthly vehicle parking passes and managed by the parking authority. Mr. Marple said he would like to see them parking in dedicated areas with signs, etc., that is provided to encourage non-vehicle transportation around downtown. Basically, he would like to see signage in designated areas similar to what we do with bikes. So, hey, here's a bike rack right here. Please park your bike here. Don't leave it on the sidewalk here. Matt's going to help explain some of the ordinance rules around this and where the parking authority lies in this discussion, because they are parking them in off-street facilities. So does the authority have any ability to regulate those parking of those devices on off-street parking facilities?
The ordinance, yes, the ordinance you all recommended for adoption today speaks to the idea of the city manager or his designee putting up signs that would regulate parking. And I think that in and of itself would probably include excluding certain other vehicles, scooters, bicycles, whatever, from parking facilities. Now, I did look under the city code sections that were specific to what they call, I think it's personal assisted mobile devices, electric power. Shared mobility device is what I believe a scooter is referred to. Is that right, Dave? Do I have that shared mobility device?
Yeah, the ordinance is shared utility systems.
Okay.
But yeah.
So, under, and I'll try to quote this section correctly to you all. Under section 10-55 operating regulations, 3G, it says here, the city manager or the manager's designee reserves the right to designate specified areas of the city where the riding, parking, locking of shared mobility devices is prohibited. And then under 5 here of that same section, to the extent a permittee desires to park bicycles or e-scooters on city property other than the public right-of-way, the permittee must first obtain the right to do so from the city manager or the city manager's designee. So it's clear that the city council previously has taken steps to try to regulate things. And to be honest, I don't even know if our city manager knows this is going on, and that it's not something that the parking authority would want. I suppose if you all wanted to bring it to the city manager's attention, you could vote to direct Dave to send a letter to read about it, to kind of spur the interest and to look into it. You all could vote as far as a recommendation to the city manager. But it wouldn't be necessarily something that this particular board could regulate. That's all I have.
Well, I guess from Mr. Marple's point of view, that we could regulate it if it's on the off-street, in the off-street facilities, because we control the off-street facilities. But yeah, I mean, I find it a little more irritating than being on the sidewalk myself. But I know we don't have any control over that or whatever, but I mean, yeah, I mean, they're not motor vehicles. I mean, if they get permits for them, they can park in the off-street facilities like everybody else, but.
Like,
It wouldn't be, I don't think they would be considered the same as resident vehicles, that the Department of Parking Management under our ordinance could regulate in that fashion.
But we also regulate all off-street facilities, parking in them, whether it's residential or business or whatever, don't we? Isn't that our purview, is to manage the off-street facilities?
That's what I know, that's what I brought.
It is, but wouldn't it be considered for motor vehicles? I mean, I suppose from a general perspective, if you look at a scooter, it's more of a recreational device. It isn't something that a resident would drive to and from. I suppose they could drive to and from work on a daily basis, or have to rely on a particular parking spot on the street or a parking facility, which I think is what the intent of the Parking Authority Act for Lynchburg was. So, and really, I mean, that to do something like that, I think City Council would have to act on that and include it in the ordinance for shared mobility devices. But as it is, I feel like it'd be, and there's just my 2 cents on it, okay? I feel like it'd be so much easier just to ask the city manager to try to regulate this, or if you all wanted to have a designated spot in the parking facilities for people to leave the scooter, that it wouldn't interfere with vehicles, or just have the city manager prohibit it entirely.
Okay, my question would be, so I have a bicycle, not a scooter, and I decide that I'm going to park my bicycle in a spot and take up a whole parking spot in one of the off-street parking lots. And everyone that owns a permit and every business that owns a permit says, Dave, there's this girl parking this bicycle in this parking spot. So can Dave do anything about it?
About the bicycle and
Yeah, I mean, it's
parking
not a
spot?
motor vehicle. I mean, from the way you're saying it, I guess is, you see, I think that's what Dave Marple's thing is that here's these scooters taking up a permitted parking spot. And what can Dave do about it when he's got people that pay for permits?
Is the question like
Do you know if they're actually taking up parking spaces currently, or are they kind of like off to the side in an area?
Right now in the Midtowns Act, they're off to the side of the wall. The gentleman that owns the company, or I shouldn't say owns the company, the gentleman responsible for the maintenance and upkeep of the scooters, he comes into the parking deck and constantly switches things on and off, and staff enforcement has asked me, what should we do about that? And I said, well, he can't block a driveway. That's illegal. He can't park and do that. And if he doesn't purchase a monthly parking permit, then he's not permitted to park in the garage during normal business hours. So he would be cited, he would need to write a parking citation for that. I've instructed staff that if they are found in parking spaces, that for the time being to take a picture of it, send it to me for documentation, and to please remove that scooter from the parking space so that a vehicle can use it. Whether they put it on the sidewalk or they put it off to the side, just to make sure that that parking space is usable for the public. And they're not easy to move. They're heavy little buggers. So yeah, they got some. They're awkward.
Just in response to your question, I suppose if we look at the intent of the Lynchburg Parking Authority Act, and I was taking a moment to read under Section 2 here, that Declaration of Public Necessity. It speaks a lot about traffic congestion and the easing of traffic congestion. And I think really if you all look at it from the perspective of motor vehicles, because I think that's what the heart of this gets to, is that's what it's really about. I don't think you all under this ordinance would have the authority to regulate bicycles, mopeds, shared mobility devices, or whatever they are in parking there. So I don't think the intent of this particular statute was to authorize the Department of Parking Management or the Parking Authority to issue permits at $25 a month or whatever for someone to park a bicycle in a parking spot. So I guess
or to give them a ticket for.
or to give them a ticket, because there's other there's other means in our city code to regulate that.
Okay.
So that would be, I think that would probably be the easiest way to do it. I suppose you all could, if you all were inclined and the legislature would amend this to allow for that, that might be something you could consider, but I mean, I would think that would be probably unnecessary. I don't know how often, this could, to be honest, this might be something that could be taken care of by a phone call.
Oh, I agree. And I'm very happy for the city manager to do that
Yeah.
instead of us. I'm just curious as to, what Dave's position would be if somebody takes up permitted parking spaces.
My question would be like, in a broad sense, do we have the authority, like, within an off-street facility, like you were saying, they're leaning against the wall, they're not in a parking space, can you say, go away, or is that under the city manager? Like, general administration of the facility, not specifically to a parking space, but like cluttering up other areas of the facility.
I think that would be, to Matt's point, if we see as a board that that's a problem, or I see that that's a problem, I can either address it directly to the city manager, and if it still doesn't get resolved, then bring it to you all, and then, like Matt said, you all direct me through a vote to write a letter on behalf of the Lynchburg Parking Authority that says that this is becoming an issue. We've noticed it as board members. Mr. City Manager, can you please, step in and make a designated area? Here's some of our recommendations for what that looks like. And then we present that to the city manager to do what he sees fit at that point. Correct?
Yeah, I think that would
Okay.
be a great way to handle it. And you need only reference those sections that were even in this proposed ordinance if it's adopted. And it would be clear that it's the city manager's duty to even regulate the parking facilities as it relates to putting up signs. Hopefully that would resolve it.
So I think at this point, it's just one of those things that, I noticed, Dave noticed, and they just got here. I mean, they literally hit our streets probably a couple months ago, so I think we're still in that newly married phase where we're trying to figure out what things look like and taking note of issues or successes and maybe deal with those as more of a holistic measure down the road after 6 months of having them on the city streets.
Dave, have you looked at other cities and what they have done? So I know like Charlotte, they've had them for a number of years, and I don't know if they have current regulations like where you can place them and in the parking decks where they're allowed. So that might be helpful to look at what other places have done that have had them for many years.
Yeah, I have not. I mean, it just hit. I've just been rolling with it as it goes. I've worked with Gaynell Hart, our public works director, and brought it to her attention if there's been anything that we've run across. But right now, it's kind of let's wait and see what happens and address it. But you're absolutely correct, and I have not researched other cities like Charlotte or. I'm trying to think who else in Virginia has them. I know Richmond has them.
I think that should be covered in the ordinance that council passed, what the options are. I don't remember your exact ordinance, but I look it up as to what can be done.
See what option.
I see them mostly laying in the bushes. I mean, they're everywhere. It's so annoying. You just see them laying on the sidewalk. And it's too bad when a company comes into a town or a city that they can't, if they allow them to do this, they say, okay, you can do this, but you need to have racks, like, some of the bicycle companies that rent bikes around larger cities do.
Yeah, they're a great idea, which is nice if it's kept tidy.
Yeah, they just let them drop them anywhere.
I think a lot of cities have done that. They've actually regulated where you can put them. So like when you go to lock your scooter, and I use them because I don't own a car. So for me, it's a fine way to get around for micro-mobility. But in bigger cities, they do have areas of where you can permitted to leave your scooters where they will lock. Otherwise, they're not going to lock, and you just keep paying as they're on. So I think Charlotte, they moved to do that, and they have like every block, they have like a square where you can leave it, and it's the only place where it can lock. Otherwise, it's not going to lock for you. So that is one option, and it may be you look at parking decks as being an area where they just won't lock, and you're kind of forced to bring them to a certain designated area where they will lock.
So that's different from geofencing, because geofencing just has the parameter of where they can operate, but this is
Right.
just within the geofence. It says if you don't bring it and return it to these designated points, you're just gonna keep getting charged for the geos.
Right. Yeah.
So people start to notice when it's like $100 they just spent for 5 minutes on a scooter, like, what the heck?
Yeah.
Okay, I understand. Okay, I think, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Dave, I'm sorry, I just wanted to add one thing.
Yeah.
Madam Mayor, I think you're 100% right. Under that subsection G that I read,
I think the city manager or whoever he designates could absolutely set up a parking system or do whatever for a scooter to park within the city. You know, with the way the proposed ordinance is now to go to city council, I think that could be construed together, because the city manager has the authority to put up signs prohibiting or authorizing parking, I think. I'm not certain exactly how it was worded. But there was authority in there, I think, to regulate by sign the parking within, right, within those facilities.
Yeah.
I will. I'll let them know what came out of it. And we have a meeting tomorrow. It's our development coordination meeting where we talk about projects that are going on in the city, and a lot of Kent White and Gaynell and other folks are in that. So I'll bring it up at that and talk
That'd
about
be good.
this was brought up. And so it just gets on the city radar at this point. We can start monitoring it and see what we can do.
Yeah, it's better to do it early in the process
Yes.
versus letting them lay all over the city and then later on coming back and saying, no, you got to move them.
Right.
That ordinance was passed so that we would have some options. I remember that.
Yeah.
We had to have it passed by December 31 or we would have no options, and we do have some, so.
Yep, I remember that. Okay, if there's no more discussion on that, we'll move into comments. This is the opportunity for Lynchburg Parking Authority members to make any comments on business of today or anything else that they want to bring to know. This is also the chance for the public to make a comment, so if anybody out there that's listening and watching would like to comment on anything that we've discussed today, they can send an email to parking.authority@lynchburgva.gov or text your question to area code 434-401-5652. And we'll be more than happy to answer any of those. At this point, there is no public comment right now. Is there any comments from parking authority members while we wait a minute for anybody from the public to chime in?
Just for like my general interest, the current administration that is in has made a promise to kind of expedite and speed up electric vehicles. So in terms of parking and charging stations, are you guys starting to look into that as, you know, increasing the number of chargers downtown, especially as they become more prevalent?
Yes. Just met with the fleet director, Chuck Kramer, and we have a whole, I'd say, coalition of city staff that's reviewing alternate transportation and charging stations. So, you know, that is a hot topic at the city right now, is how can we integrate a more EV fleet into our operations and what type of infrastructure we'll need to put in place. That committee just met last week on Friday, I believe is when we met. So I'm actually, my directive right now is to reach out to Jim Talion with the Main Street Renewal Project and AEP to discuss if there's any opportunity for us to use conduit. Since the streets are all ripped up right now, can we put any of that in? What does that look like? How is it managed? So it is right on the top of the agenda amongst many of us, and it's an ongoing discussion, because yeah, that's huge. I've read some articles about GM and Ford committing to 2030 to go fully electric. And something I know Reed, our interim deputy city manager, Reed Woodica, is very, very interested in what we can do for alternative vehicles. So we are there looking at it. Okay, great question, because that is hitting us quick and hard, and in no time, 10 years we'll be here. Well, I have nothing else. Nobody emailed in and no text messages. So if that's all that we have, then I would move to, one of you can move to adjourn the meeting. Moved by.
Second.
All right, meeting adjourned at 3:31. Our next meeting will be April 13th at 2:30, probably in here again.